Hi there, Craig here, reporting from DevLearn 2012 Day 1. I thought I'd just spend a couple of minutes sharing the key takeaway, the key nuggets, the Monday morning quick wins, as I perhaps call them, from each of the sessions that I've been to today. I'll probably blog about them in a bit more detail. I'll probably have lots of conversations with people about them, but I just thought that while it's still fresh at the end of Day 1, I would share them. So if you'd excuse me, I'm going to refer to the iPad app because that's where I've taken my notes. The first session that I went to was around content strategy, and it was facilitated by Clark Quinn, or @Quinnovator on Twitter. And the key takeaway for me from that was I asked Clark the question, and I phrased it and provided the context around it insofar that my organisation doesn't have a learning and development strategy, so it definitely doesn't have a content strategy. So I asked Clark what common pitfalls he'd seen other organisations make when they introduced a strategy or any strategies that had currently existed. And quite unsurprisingly, his response back to me was, the common pitfall he sees are people delivering courses. And he admitted that there was a time and a place to deliver courses, but he says he sees far too many people deliver strategies and develop strategies with a course as its raison d'etre, as its main onus, rather than a course being one of many potential elements that it could deliver. So resources rather than courses, which has always been my thinking, is certainly something that I'm going to focus on as a result of Clark's session. The second session that I went to was the keynote for the day. Fantastic keynote facilitated by John Landau of Avatar and Titanic and lots of other films that he's been involved in. And a really key takeaway for me from that was the fact that Avatar was written many years ago. It was written back in 1997 or something like that, way before the technology existed. It showed that somebody who had a vision and saw what the potential for the future might hold actually created something that at that point in time couldn't exist, certainly not with the vision that that person had. However, when the opportunity came along, when the technology evolved to a point, they were able to put it into practice fairly quickly. And I say fairly quickly with somewhat tongue-in-cheek because it still took 5 years to actually create. The second takeaway that I took from John's session, and I promised there'd only be one key takeaway, was that he said that James Cameron did not limit his scripts around what was technically possible. And he said you should write your business plans in the same way as well. And I thought that was a really great way of thinking. Don't write your business plan as to what's achievable, because you're never going to be pushing the envelope. You're never going to be pushing the limits of what you, your team and your organisation can achieve. So again, the fact that we don't have an L&D strategy at the moment is certainly something that I'm keen to take John's advice and actually develop a strategy that technically is out of reach, because we've something to aspire to then, with something to grow into. The next session that I attended was evidence-based training. There's no yellow brick road, facilitated by Ruth Clark. And a really interesting piece of research that she showed was the fact that simple activities fared far better from achieving learning outcomes than more complex activities. Now you might think that that's fairly straightforward. Keep it short and simple. Keep it short and simple stupid. However, she actually said that despite fairly simple activities rating better from a learning outcome perspective than a complex activity, when learners were actually asked which activity they preferred, believe it or not, they opted for the more complex activity. So I thought there was something in there about the fact that not always take into account the learner feedback, not always designed for what the learner's expectations or requirements or desires are, but actually not to ignore the research around which activities are more impactful than others. And of course then you've got a weighing off balance against balancing what actually has an impact and improves value to what's engaging. And I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer to that. The next session I went to was Taking Video to the Next Level by Mark Locke, and I've got to be honest, I found this session was a little bit too advanced for me. It seemed to be aimed at people who already had a very good grasp at video production, who already were using some fairly complex pieces of software and camera and audio capture equipment. He did say, and he did caveat that by saying that you can do this on webcams, you can do this on flip cameras, and you can do this on smartphones, and he then skimmed onto the more complex stuff again. So if I'm honest, I didn't really take a great deal away from that session, but I know a lot of people that were in there were producing video using professional production techniques to a high level, and I'm sure they did take something away. And then the final session of the day that I attended came at a very timely point for me, because you may know that I've been using iBooks Author for some time now, and there's been one widget in iBooks Author that I just haven't had a clue how to use, and that's the HTML widget. So I went to a really great session with Jason Baker, who actually showed us how to use that HTML5 widget by using a tool called Hype by Tumult, which seems a fairly simple way of building HTML objects, and then obviously being able to embed them not only into iBooks but actually being able to do anything that you want with them. So that came at a very, very timely point for me. I've kind of nailed how to use iBooks Author. There was that one missing chunk of information that I didn't have, and I couldn't seem to find easily on the web, and attending Jason's session today really nailed it for me. So in a nutshell, in just under 6 minutes, that's what I took away from DevLearn Day 1. See you tomorrow.